Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. En nombre de todo el equipo de la Térmica queremos daros la bienvenida a Málaga 451, la Noche de los Libros, un festival literario que celebramos por quinta edición este año. Estamos muy contentos de que estéis con nosotros. Es el público, lo decimos desde el primer año, es el público el que hace que este festival sea grande. Y os damos las gracias de corazón por venir a demostrar que la literatura importa y que la literatura interesa. Hemos querido empezar esta noche con Mircea Cărtărescu, una de las voces fundamentales de Europa. A la entrada del auditorio os han dado este papel. Él va a recitar esos poemas en rumano. La traducción simultánea la tendréis mediante los aparatos. También os recomiendo que sigáis su lectura, su recital, leyendo por encima las palabras en castellano para que veáis la musicalidad original del poema, de la poesía de Cărtărescu. Para introducir a Cărtărescu y para entrevistarle, hemos querido contar con un periodista, una persona fundamental también en la cultura malagueña, que es Carlos Pranger, que va a hacer inmediatamente la presentación de Mircea. Así que muchísimas gracias, esperamos que disfrutéis esta noche y que vivan los libros. Muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes. Os voy a leer un texto que he preparado acerca de Mircea Cărtărescu, que se llama Mircea Cărtărescu en las fronteras de lo absoluto. No les extrañará si les digo que en los últimos meses los libros de Mircea Cărtărescu han sido un apéndice más, no solo de mi cuerpo, sino también de mi espíritu. Y es para mí un honor conocer finalmente a la persona que se refugia detrás de las palabras. Gracias, Mircea, por estar hoy aquí. Y gracias a la organización de esta quinta edición de Fahrenheit 451, en especial a Chema Martín por la confianza depositada, agradecimiento extensible a vosotros, al público que nos acompaña esta tarde. No todos los días tenemos el privilegio de compartir tiempo con uno de los grandes narradores contemporáneos. No me gusta entrar demasiado en consideraciones cualitativas. O sí, esta tarde voy a aplacar al comedido Pranger. Y les voy a decir que es el narrador más original del momento. El mejor por una simple cuestión: el riesgo. Seguro que Málaga, asimismo, le traerá suerte y algún día este hijo de los suburbios obreros de Bucarest alcanzará el premio Nobel. Pero ¿saben una cosa? Y es que intuyo que ese premio no lo cambiará, no se endiosará. Seguirá escribiendo sin cesar en ese gran manuscrito, en ese poema infinito compartido que decía Paul Valéry. Cărtărescu se define a sí mismo como posmoderno. No le gusta llamarse escritor, eso lo deja en mano de otros. Simplemente escribe y seguirá escribiendo para siempre. La obra de Cărtărescu desafía convenciones, rompe desde el corazón del centro de Europa cualquier prejuicio o idea repetida. Vive en la continua transformación, recordando a su admirado Kafka. En Cărtărescu el espacio y el tiempo se desmoronan y nos queda un flujo torrencial e inabarcable, la literatura. Ha sido una tarea imposible abarcar a Cărtărescu. Es un constante aprendizaje y reaprendizaje. Acercarse a él para desaprender. Cada nuevo libro es un templo del asombro. Mi mente lectora aún está impactada, en conmoción. No sabría por dónde comenzar, pero eso también es belleza, el dejarse llevar. Y eso es lo que hace exactamente Mircea cuando escribe. Me he dejado llevar por la obra y hoy nos vamos a dejar llevar por él, por Mircea Cărtărescu, cuyos libros están disponibles para nosotros gracias a la labor del editor Enrique Redel de Editorial Impedimenta. Quiero agradecerle públicamente su trabajo, esfuerzos y desvelos, su apuesta por los autores sinceros, por la literatura que sacude y cambia al lector. Sigues y seguirás haciendo mucha falta. Obras como Solenoide, Nostalgia o Cegador Son ya parte de nosotros, de nuestra herencia cultural, sin olvidar otros como el Levante, las bellas extranjeras, Lulú o ese paisaje autobiográfico trazado en el ojo castaño de nuestro amor. Son obras que dejan al lector extasiado y que deben mucho a su vez a la traductora, Marian Ochoa de Eribe. Ella, con su sensibilidad y talento, ha captado esa relación del autor con la trascendencia. Seguro que se siente al igual que yo, que las palabras de Cărtărescu, escritor, y también la persona, le acompañarán para siempre. Tras esta breve presentación, nuestro invitado va a leeros unos poemas. Les aconsejo que se dejen llevar por la musicalidad, por el sonido de las palabras en rumano. Vamos a emprender un viaje, el de la literatura, el de Ulises, y es un viaje sin retorno posible. Repito, maten todos los hábitos y automatismos mentales, déjense llevar. Les pido un fuerte aplauso para Mircea Cărtărescu.
Buenas noches, bună seara, good evening. I'm really very happy to be here with you in this wonderful night, which is just beginning. First, I want to thank very much Chema and Carlos for the great presentation that they did here for my very modest person and work. Please don't believe them. They were much too generous. I don't deserve so many superlatives, but I was happy to hear them. At first I will be reading a few poems from an anthology that I have here, and I can't wait the discussion, actually. Îmi amintesc. Stradă putrezită în amurg, gard negru de fier forjat, plop negru în flăcări, câine galben levitând peste zidul de cărămidă, nori curgând înspăimântător de repede și spaima fără leac, fără sfârșit, corpul tău șchiopătând livid în palma Domnului, case galbene, stacojii și mama ținându-te în brațe și tu levitând peste copii cu cranii gigantice. În vechea alimentară, acum ruinată, într-un colț, în cârpe murdare, cadavrul vânzătoarei. Un bețiv din altă lume ridică ghiveciul spart, mângâie mușcata, ferfenițită. Sudoare galbenă, stradă cu bălți galbene, frica făcându-te să o răcăi, o față necioplită lângă fața ta, degete cu tăieturi înnegrite se întind, îți iau mâna. Și în fine casa, acasă, țiganca râde, te cheamă, îți întinde bucata de rahat, verde transparentă cu zahăr pudră, coloane la etaj, geamuri sparte, obloane albastre. Mama plutind prin camera schimonosită, fierul de călcat mai mare ca lumea și totul urlă ca în chinurile facerii și casa trosnește și mama țipă. Oriunde merg pe zăpadă, mă împiedic de mâna neagră a mamei, iese ca un ciot dintre șinele de tramvai, se întinde din zidul policlinicii vechi, scormone prin ruine. Oriunde calc, printre ruinele galbene, dau de mama, ridicată în capul oaselor, pe patul ei cu tăblii de fier. Un mare copac negru arde lângă o fabrică, fabrică veche, de cărămidă, o pasăre scheletică șchioapătă printre geamuri sparte. Toată viața am trăit înfundat în toracele negru al mamei. Printre coastele ei am văzut lumea, soarele și luna sunt sfârcurile ei, norii sunt măselele ei uriașe. Și ce nori curgeau peste atelierul de geamuri, și ce față stranie aveai, ce față stranie aveai, mamă, ce față mare și galbenă. Stăpân al ruinelor în amurg, îți văd părul sclipind în vântul de primăvară și muguri negri de primăvară te ning și norii se învolbură peste blocuri galbene, uriașe. Bloc vechi de dinainte de război, fărâmițat, stacojiu și singurătatea mea din preadolescență, strada curgând pe lângă el ca un fluviu galben, scunda mercerie, ocolindu-l ca o șalupă. Bloc cu un salcâm chinuit lângă el, la mansardă nimeni, rufe troznind în vânt, huietul singurătății în urechile de preadolescent și norii ca un alt cartier de vile liniștite. Fațadă spartă, mânjită cu litere, HG, parcă un J portocaliu, violent, murdare, ca urmele de degete de pe pereții closetului și tencuiala sfărmicioasă cu viespi. Acolo intrară părinții mei, înghițiți de esofagul de piatră, zăbreliți în liftul dat cu păcură, trași de cabluri de păcură murdară. Nu i-am mai văzut de atunci. Blocul stacojiu i-a atras pe culoarele verzi murdar cu leandrii, i-a storcit între pereții clocotitori, le-a împrăștiat oasele pe mozaicuri. De atunci e și mai stacojiu, iar copacul și mai chinuit. Balconul, când cerul mustește de sânge, mustește și el de urechelnițe. Îmi amintesc, sudoarea ieșea în boabe printre pietrele caldarâmului. Țin minte, alimentarea de mahala prăbușită pe nori și norii fugind spre burta mamei, ciocănind acolo cu 1 miliard de coarne de melc, înghesuindu-se acolo în miliardul de pori. Știu, grădinițele, creșele, drumurile de gaz lampant. Înțeleg, noaptea cu gușă endemică, stelele, umplutura de crizanteme tocate, de artere tocate, de heleștee. Te revăd îngenunchiată, țâțe căzute, părul clocotitor, brațul alb întins, degetele bățindu-mi fața, uriașă, terifică, bombă explodând cu încetinitorul, muscă mare și neagră, bâzâind în plasa nervilor mei. Draga mea mamă, care nu m-ai născut niciodată, îți scriu aceste rânduri, ce nu vor trăi niciodată. Mai știu strada de diamant și casa de la numărul 0, în care mi împleteai venele ca să-i faci tatei fular. Mai știu norii aceia legați cu lanț ca jigodile, repezindu-se spre burta ta, sfârtecând-o, scoțându-mă de acolo, mi-amintesc, mamă, și înfășurându-mă în plăpumioara părului tău. Ce urle te scoteai, ce vânătă erai, pe când norii, bărbații tăi și mamoșii tăi te fecundau, mă nășteau, când eu, curat ca laptele și cu minte, îmi lăsam umbra degetelor pe fața ta. And the second poem. Thank you. Nori peste blocul de vis-a-vis. Nu pot mișca acul busolei doar concentrându-mă. Am încercat. Nu sunt în stare. Nu pot transmite imaginea unei cărți de joc. Am încercat. Am vrut să levitez și stând pe spate, în sudoarea patului desfăcut, m-am concentrat jumătate de oră până am simțit că nebunesc. Am încercat în metrou să fac o fată să se uite la mine și firește că nu s-a uitat. Doamne, nu sunt alesul Tău. Mintea mea nu poate să schimbe lumea. Nu am destulă dragoste, destulă credință. Nu am o aură în jurul capului. Nu mi te-ai arătat și nu mi-ai dat niciun semn. Pipăi cu degetele mușamaua feței de masă. Ea nu cedează, nu se transformă în aburi roșcați. Ating buclele fetiței mele. Ele sunt moi și auriu întunecate. Nimic nu e altfel decât îmi spun simțurile. Nu există iluzia. Mintea mea e oglinda plană a lumii. Plană, plată. Nici o zgârietură, nici o viață anterioară, nici o făptură ectoplasmatică, nici Agarthi, nici Shambhala, nici Maya. Cât despre vise, ele sunt doar cosmetice pe nimic. Privesc în focul aragazului ca hipnotizat. Știu că am stat într-un uter. Știu că voi sta într-un sicriu sau voi mânji pământul cu sângele meu. Nu voi găsi eu fisura. Nu voi întoarce eu capul din fotografia de grup. Mulțumesc, thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Sit down here, please. Mircea, sit here, please.
Here.
Thank you. Well, Mircea Cărtărescu, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here.
I thank you.
I've loved the musicality of your poetry. I've always thought that poetry is the heart of what we are, which is a mystery. I recommend the audience that they read your book, El Levante, for example. Although all your work is very connected to poetry, I would say poetics. What has poetics meant for you in your career and your life?
Thank you, Carlos, for this very good question to start the discussion. Actually, I myself think that poetry is something very important. It's vital. It's a vital organ, like the heart or like our liver, like our brain in our life. But I have to make a distinction, which is very important. Poetry is not what you read in poetry books. Not only what you read there. Sometimes in a book of poetry you cannot find any poetry. Poetry is something very different. Poetry is not the ability to write verses, but first is the ability to see the world as it is. It's the ability that many of us preserved from our childhood to go on seeing the world in a childish way. I think this is the best definition of art and, in our case, of poetry. I met a lot of people who never wrote a single verse, but who were definitely poets. They were definitely and great poets. Because they could have been 60 or 70 or 80, but in their heart, they stayed children. They had that fresh and miraculous and I would say magical look that a children has towards the world. So I think that poetry is everywhere. It's everywhere because it is in ourselves. It is in ourselves and not in the real world. we have to discuss if such a thing exists actually. Poetry is in our eyes. If you are able to look at this bottle and to see its extraordinary beauty, because everything is beauty, is beautiful. You are poets. If you see an ordinary, a vulgar bottle, you are not poets. I think this is because poetry is so vital, because it's the core of our souls.
Mm-hmm. Every time I read you, I always feel astonished, full of surprise. I read and reread and always discover something new. But I always discover something new through words. I know that you don't like calling yourself a writer. You call yourself somebody who just writes. Mm-hmm. And as you know, words love other words, but they have more difficulties when it comes to things or thoughts. And I always remember the phrase of John Baptist: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Is writing a spiritual exercise?
You are right that I have a sort of a repugnance to call myself a writer. Mm-hmm. Because calling yourself a writer is like calling yourself a saint, or calling yourself a philosopher. You cannot say, hello, I'm a philosopher, or hello, I'm an illuminated person, because somebody else has to call you like that. If you call yourself a visionary person or a prophet, you are only ridiculous. Because a real prophet, never calls himself a prophet. He doesn't even know that he is a prophet, or she is a prophet, a prophetess. It's lack of modesty. It's lack of modesty and lack of good sense to call yourself a writer. I say about myself that I'm a man who writes literature. I think it's a much better definition of what I really am. And I write literature not because I want to get somewhere by writing literature, not because I want to publish books, or I want to become famous, or I become famous, or I want to gain money, or I want to become a big shot in the world. I write literature because, as Kafka said, I want to understand my situation. I want to understand actually what is happening. Why in this very moment we are able to talk to each other, and our public is able to see us and to reflect on this event. This is my real preoccupation, and from this point of view, I would say that I would rather define myself as someone who thinks about 2 or 3 important questions than a real writer. And my most important question, and I think it's the most important question, is about the nature of reality. What is reality? What is this absolutely impossible thing that the world exists and that we are able to reflect, to feel it first and to reflect on it. And I always wondered some additional things. Would the world exist if I didn't exist? Would the world exist if nobody existed? Would the world exist if not even a virus existed? Mm-hmm. How it would have been possible that the world existed if nobody saw it, if there was no eye, no ear, no nothing. I'm very much troubled with this kind of questions, which actually are philosophical and religious questions more than literary questions. But I think a man who writes, a person who writes, has to think about those basic things, has to think till his brain is exploding. And maybe this is the answer, the explosion of his brain.
Mm-hmm. So you use a lot of metaphysics in your writing. When I was reading you, I came across a coincidence, fate, which is also a very important part of literature. And I wrote a long essay about Salinger, and we both quoted the same lines, me and you. And it's the line in Carpenter's, Salinger's last book, in the dialogue between Seymour and Buddy, when you wrote down that you were a writer by profession.
Okay.
It sounded to me like the loveliest euphemism I've ever heard. When was writing ever your profession? It's never been anything but your religion. Talking about religion, I know that writers always have, or at least good writers, a strong relation with solitude. I was thinking of Paul Auster's invention of solitude. The words of St. John of the Cross, I'll say them first in Spanish, soledad sonora. A translation into English could be ringing silence. Or even St. Augustine, who teaches us or taught European culture to read in silence, and that changed everything. What has solitude meant for you?
Solitude is very important for me, and actually I just finished a book on solitude, a book about solitude. Yes, so I'm in the topic now.
Another coincidence.
Yes, it's a kind of small coincidence, if you can classify coincidences in big and small. Okay. I would like to say something. Solitude is, as you said, a metaphysical feeling. It has no connection to our real life. So in my real life, I am very happy. I have a very beautiful family. It's the most important thing for me. I love a lot of people, and some people love me too. So I'm not alone in this world. I have a lot of friends, a lot of people who care about me, and I care about all the people I know. But I'm still very, very lonely. I'm still very, very lonely. It's like being on a banquise near Antarctica somewhere with all the people I know. But we are lonely even if we are together, because we are floating on the icy seas of Antarctica, for example. When I feel lonely, I feel lonely with all the people, with everybody. So I take everybody with me in my loneliness. It's not because my loneliness is not because nobody loves me or I'm left alone and I have no love and so on. But it's something very deep in our being. You can be a clown and be very lonely. You can be a rock star and be very lonely. And you have to be very lonely, and so on. So loneliness is not something rare or for a few people. Everybody is lonely. Everybody is depressive. Everybody has to feel our terrible fate. Our terrible fate, because we will all disappear. Our world will disappear. All the books will disappear. All our universe will disappear at the end. This is what makes us very lonely, very sad, and in a way, very helpless.
I think that loneliness is a great inspiration for literature.
Yes, of course.
And it connects with a group of writers that Spanish writer Enrique Villamatas calls writers of the no. Kafka, Proust, Pynchon, Salinger, and so many. And you seem to have read them all, and I think you've interiorized, they're part of you, you've interiorized them very, very good. Are they the foundation of all the rest of you? Could we call them the lost originals? I think you are one of the lost originals, although you're not lost. Maybe we are a bit lost in translation today, but you're here, and I would like to know your opinion about this group of writers, the negativity. There's a certain current in literature towards the negative, towards the no.
I return to Kafka, who is actually the writer for me, just because he was not a writer and didn't call himself a writer. He was much more than a writer. I return to Kafka, who said, I think I know my place in my time, in my generation. I am the one who concentrates the negativity of my epoch, of my era. So you are right to say that the one who concentrates the negativity of an epoch is a sort of an anti-classic, and it's as important as the real classics, who, if you remember the essay of T.S. Eliot about what is a classic, T.S. Eliot said, all it's positive in an epoch is a classic. A classic is the most mature writer of an epoch, of a mature epoch and a mature language. Kafka was exactly the reverse, exactly the negativity of it. And because T.S. Eliot called Virgil the archetypal classic, Virgilius, Virgil, Kafka is a sort of an anti-Virgil. An anti-Virgil. Virgil was the greatest poet of the antiquity. Kafka is the greatest poet of the negative modern world. But in a way, they were very, very similar. Please remember that at the end of their lives, both Virgil and Kafka gave orders on their deathbed, gave orders that their work should be destroyed. Maybe you don't know that Aeneida, the great epopee written by Virgil, was never allowed to be published by its author. On his deathbed, Virgil called a slave and ordered him to burn his manuscript before anyone saw it. He was 51 by that time. And it was only because of the intervention of the Emperor Augustus, who was a great admirer of Virgil, that now we have the Aeneid. It was the same with Kafka. Kafka ordered his very good friend, Max Brod, ordered that all his manuscript left by him to be burned, exactly like Virgil 2,000 years before. So it's a tremendous example of how a classic, a real classic and a real anti-classic actually behaved in the same way. They ordered that their work should be destroyed. And I think this is the most important artistic act, the most important artistic decision. It was not only them that actually were pure artists. There are several examples. You mentioned some gods of literature, like Thomas Pynchon, like I don't know who Proust, and so on. But there are others, less known, which, in my opinion, represent the quintessence of what is art and what art should be. and I will give you two examples. The first one is that of Daniel Paul Schreber, or the President Schreber. He's better known with this nickname, the President Schreber. He was a high clerk, functionary, in the German Empire in the 19th century. And at a certain moment, he went mad. He had paranoid schizophrenia. He was mad for 7 years in a bedlam. He stayed in a bedlam, and he was treated very badly. You know how the mad people were treated by that time. He was actually tortured by the doctors. And after 7 years, he found a miraculous power to be able to write a whole book, 300 pages, about his madness. With the power of reason applied to madness, which is absolutely astonishing. I never read such a book. And in the 20th century, this book became very famous because Sigmund Freud wrote about this case, the President Schreber's case, and then Deleuze wrote a very big study about it. But the President Schreber was no writer. He was no artist. He was a simple person who actually, in a very sad hour, he became mad. And after that, he wrote about his madness. So he wrote for nobody. He wrote this book just for himself. He didn't want the book to be published, even. And the second case of a writer who writes for nobody and a painter who paints for nobody was the very strange case of Darger. If you remember, if you heard about him, Henry Darger, who used to be a janitor. All his life he was a janitor in a hospital in Chicago. He was the loneliest person. He never met anyone. He didn't speak to anyone for 70 years. And he was washing the corridors on the hospital. And when he died, they broke the doors of the only room he was living in, and found him dead with his head on the desk because he had no bed. He was sleeping for 50 years with the head on his desk. And then they discovered something absolutely unexpected. They discovered that Darger wrote the biggest novel in the world. He wrote a novel, 30,000 pages.
Wow.
A 30,000 pages novel. A second novel, a lesser one, of 20,000 pages. And his autobiography of only 15,000 pages. All these books were magnificently illustrated. So he was also a painter, a fantastic painter. The most important work of Darger was called the war between little girls and the army, a real army. So he described the very long war between an army of little girls and the real army. And there were hundreds of battles. There were thousands of characters, among which he himself was a character. And everybody he knew were characters. And this is something absolutely impossible to believe and to imagine. And he was doing everything only for himself, for nobody else. He never showed anything from what he was doing to anyone. in my opinion, they were the real artists. I have to confess to you that sometimes I'm ashamed that I publish books, because this is the first compromise, the first compromise. And the other compromises, of course, are coming from here. For example, the compromise that I do talking with you in front of the public. Darger wouldn't have done this. It's always in my mind. Not even Kafka would have done this. Can you imagine Kafka coming to a festival and talking to someone?
Málaga, no.
No, he never have. Can you imagine Thomas Pynchon? No. Never, never ever. Can you imagine Salinger? No. This is the difference between real huge artists that didn't want to make any compromise, that wrote only to understand themselves and the world around, and all the other all the other writers who play the game more or less, and are very proud that they win prizes, that they publish thousands of books or tens of thousands of books, and so on. Of course, I'm only joking in a way, but sometimes I wonder how would have been to write my books only for me. And I think I would have been tremendously happy, as Kafka was, happy in his unhappiness, as Max Brod said about him.
Yeah, talking about your books, reading Solenoid, I had a strong resemblance of tradition, even though it's considered a postmodernist novel or writing. You seem to deal very well with the weight of tradition. Is that because you define yourself as a postmodernist? What is postmodernism? How can it contribute to literature today?
You know, I come from a very poor family. My parents were workers coming from the countryside, because during the Romanian dictatorship, the peasants were forced to come to the cities and go to the factories. So my parents went to Bucharest in this time, in the 50s. And they were very simple persons who had nothing to do with culture, with literature, with things like that. And they didn't have books in their house. So I was born in a house without books. So I had to make myself a bookcase at home. And I remember that my mother gave me some money to buy sandwiches each day when I went to school, and to buy some juices. And I used them to buy books. And this is how I made my own bookcase. And I started to read books. And soon I discovered that I love to read more than anything else. So I never considered myself, as I told you, a real writer, but I consider myself a great reader. This is what I praise the most in what I do. I have always been a great reader, and I read everything that I could get. The story is in Solenoide. When I was about 12, I discovered the very small library in my neighborhood. And I used to go there for a few years to read books, because I didn't have but 20 or 30 books at home. So I went there. There was a pretty small room, but there were books on all the walls. It was a public library. Nobody ever went in that library. So for 4 years, I think I was the only person in that very, very poor neighborhood who went to borrow books from the library. So I only met there the librarian, who was a very strange person. I was afraid of him, actually, but who was happy to have a client, because otherwise he was making crosswords and things like that. So I started to read, and in 4 years I read all the books in that library, maybe 500 books. And this is how I started. I started alone to read and then to write, because I read those books in my adolescence. I'm really very much grateful to this library. This library was, for me, the tradition. This was the real tradition for me. The tradition that I found there. There were all sorts of books. They were mingled without any order. So I had, Tolstoy, but also second-hand writers of all kinds. So this was very important for me. And then when I went to my college, I had another chance. There was a professor in my college who was a very, very smart and well-educated woman, and who was running in her free time. Nobody was paying her for this. She was running a literary circle. And it was for the first time that I found someone to care about what I wanted to do. Because I started, when I was in the 7th grade, for example, I started to write my first poems and stories and so on. So I went to this literary circle for 4 years, and I read to other students and to this professor what I wrote in that period. This very modest college literary circle was also very important for me, because it was the first instance, let us say, who assessed my very modest writings that I could do by that time. And maybe the most important decision in my life was to go to the Faculty of Letters after I finished the college. Because 90% of the Romanian writers came from a Faculty of Letters. So this is something specific to our literature. Mostly everybody came either from letters or from philosophy, but mostly from letters. And there I started to write in a professional way, together with my colleagues of my generation, who now are among the most famous writers in Romania. But by that time, we were very young, very idealistic, a sort of hipsters, in a way.
You were called the group of the jeans?
Yes, the generation in blue jeans.
In blue jeans.
We were called like that by the government and the people who...
And the secret police.
Who hated, yes, and the secret police and the people who hated us. They called us, the generation in blue jeans, like in derision. They made fun of us.
Yeah.
But we said, okay, we identify with this. So we were wearing blue jeans, and we were writing a certain kind of literature against the establishment, of course, and we were happy. We didn't need to publish. We were underground, and we read our poems to each other. This happened in the 80s, from 1980 to 89, when the dictatorship fell. There were very interesting years for me. We couldn't find anything to eat. We were freezing in the winters, but we had Salinger, we had Kafka, we had Thomas Pynchon, we had everyone. So we are happy. We were happy.
I would like to tell the audience that Mircea has a very characteristic way of writing. He always writes by hand and without any corrections or editing. I would like to know some of your writing habits. Do you write every day? Have you got a special place?
Yes, you already mentioned some peculiarities, let's say, of my writing. Yes, I write by hand. This is very important for me because the art of fiction, it's very much the same, in my opinion, with the art of knitting. With the art of knitting, my grandmother was knitting all the time, making me pullovers or I don't know what. So when I write, I have this feeling that I'm knitting a pullover, which is long, very long, and this gives me the opportunity to think of something different, with something else. So while I write, I let my mind wandering, like a typo lady from old times who was copying something on the typewriter and thought about the movie she saw last night, for example. It's the way that I love to write. So when I write, I get into a sort of a trance. I cannot define it very well, but in a way, my inner soul, let's say, splits in two. On one hand, it's the writer, the one who writes, and on the other hand, it's me who think of walking in the forest or doing something different. So it's very important for me to write in notebooks by hand, because the art of fiction, somebody said, it's the art of slowness. The slower you write, the better is the fiction, in my opinion. It's like making love. When you make love, you don't have to hurry. It's on the contrary. On the contrary, you have to be very, very slow and passionate. It's the same with writing. And I love to write very, very slowly. When I get to my office and start writing, this happens only in the morning. I write in the morning. I write about, I don't know, at most 2 pages. 2 pages at most, but sometimes I write only 1 page, sometimes I write 1 page and a half, but never over 2 pages. So I write very, very slowly and without any project, without any plan. I never planify anything. So it's, even if I write a book which is several hundred pages long, I have no initial plan because I don't need it. I just start to write. I start to write, and the next day I reread what I wrote the previous day, and I write in the same key. And this can take 1,000 pages or 500 pages without any planification. This is how I write. This is how I write. When you'll come to my home in Bucharest, I will show you my notebooks.
I'm really, really looking forward.
Yes, which are clean. Which are clean because I don't like to erase words.
No erasing.
Because they don't look well on the page. You know, like in school, if you erase the words in your paper at school, your mark will be lower. So I hate to have ugly pages.
You've mentioned that you get into a sort of trance when you write. Myself, I love writing about other writers I admire, and I always look out for special moments in their lives that could be essential episodes. In certain ways, it could be revelations from something that we don't know what it is. I've read about a revelation, I think it's a revelation in your life, which is this ceremony when you were 7 years old, the trimming.
Yeah, I was
And
3 years old.
yeah.
Yeah,
How old were you? 3?
3.
3 years
Yeah.
old, sorry. And you were certain ways intended, or your family thought that you would be a carpenter.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the audience what happened with this episode?
Yeah, it's very, very easy and very nice. It's a very nice story. I was 3, and in our country there's a habit that the girls, the little girls at the age of 1, are cut. There's a special kind of a bread that is broken above their head. And if it's a boy, the priest comes and cuts some hair from his head, and this is a family ceremony. So it happens at home, and the priest is invited, and it's another habit is to have a plate where you put some objects. I don't know if it's in Spain too. You put some objects. You put some money. You put, for example, a screwdriver. You put a pen. You put anything, a glass of wine, and so on. And then you watch what the child takes from that plate. So if he takes the glass of wine, he will be a drunkard in life. If he takes money, he will be a businessman, and so on. And the one with the plate is the godfather.
Your godfather.
My godfather. And my godfather was a carpenter. He was doing coffins. He was doing coffins.
Coffins. Uh-huh.
And he was always wearing a pencil here on behind his ear, because he needed the pencil to measure the coffins. And he presented me the plate, and when I hesitated what to take, my mother told me, of course I have no remembrance of it, his pen just fell down on the plate. And when I saw the pen, I just grasped it, and I never let it go. And I didn't want to take anything else from the plate. So in a way, I think everything I have written was on with that pen, that fell from the heaven. Yeah, it was a very nice story. I wonder how you know about it.
I know a lot of things.
Yeah.
As I said, I've been living with you during the last months.
Thank you so much.
Connecting with this episode of your childhood, with reading, solitude, cognition, comes memory and connection. And all of these elements seem interconnected. And it seems interconnected because you have a very strong psychic life. What are dreams for you?
I will answer your question immediately, but because you talked about memory, I want to tell you something very funny, very strange before that. Mm-hmm. So, like many people, I was curious last month to do my DNA test. I bought a box from MyHeritage, and I did my DNA test. And I got the results. And the results are very funny for me, because they reflect everything I wrote. So I didn't know I had ancestors coming from the Greek archipelago. I never knew about them. But I wrote a whole book about the Greek archipelago. How come I had this kind of memories? I really don't know. Then I found out that I had, they say, I had ancestors from the Baltic Sea, from Finland and Estonia, Letonia, and so on. But I wrote about those places without having any knowledge that somebody, maybe with my name, lived 200 years before in that region. I wrote about Finnish people and so on. So this is very strange, because we know that if your father had blue eyes, you are supposed to have blue eyes also. But to remember what your ancestors saw and what they lived, it's absolutely amazing. And about, now you asked me about...
dreams. You seem to have
dreams.
a very intense psychic life.
Yes, this is. I owe this to my mother, and I will always be grateful to her, not only for this thing, but for this thing especially. My mother was a simple peasant, as I told you, and I thank God she is still living. The whole family now is thrilled, because she will be 90 this year, in a month actually. And we prepare in a big secrecy to have a great party because of that. And my mother, although she had no education, she was a huge dreamer. She had this gift. Each morning she woke up, and at the breakfast was retelling to me and to my sister what she dreamt the previous night. And those dreams, even now, I have goosebumps on my hands about them. They were absolutely Kafkaesque, absolutely terrifying, or extraordinarily beautiful. So she was dreaming herself in her village, in her parents' house. It was a traditional house where all the walls were covered with icons. Everything, like in Russia, you know, everything was covered with icons. And my mother was mixing the people she knew, the dead of the family, with the saints, with Saint George, with Saint Basil, and so on. They all were the same. Each and every morning, she told me a poem about what she dreamed. And it was a huge experience. Neither my sister nor I will forget this.
Wow, amazing.
So if I have a special relationship with the oniric world, I owe it to my mother, I think.
Yeah, that special relation with the oniric world and the real world, if what we call the real world, what we don't know what it really is, appears in Solenoid. I think there's a strong contrast between reality and dream, between, for example, the teacher's daily life and his life at night. It's quite a common motif of your books, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And I think, for example, this contrast, I've been turning it in my head, this contrast between reality and the world of dreams, I think it's one of the main reasons for the success of Solenoid in Spanish.
Maybe. In Solenoid, I risked very much. I was very conscious of the risk of describing a lot of dreams, real dreams. All the dreams I described, and I tried to analyze in my book, about 30 or 40 dreams were real dreams, and they were connected together in a sort of a network of dreams, with recurrences, with repetitions, and so on. I was very conscious of the fact, I don't know what critic said, that each time when a writer describes a dream in his novel, for example, he loses a reader. So the readers don't like dreams. usually. They refuse to take a look in somebody else's brain. Her or his dreams are enough for many readers. But I took this chance because they weren't real, they weren't usual dreams. I had the very strong, very powerful feeling that they represented something. They tried to tell me something. My own brain cried for help. It was like that hand in the I don't know, cartoons, which gets out of the water and cries in a way from help. So my mind was crying for help, and I had to try to rescue it. So I took this chance to describe some real dreams. But the whole novel is a sort of a developed dream, a sort of developed and very sophisticated dream. About the relationship between dreams and reality, I said it many times, that for me it's no distinction. It's no distinction. Dreams and reality is for me the same. It's like, you know, those Möbius stripes, which seem to be circles, but actually they are twisted circles. So my dreams are on one side and the reality is on the other side, but there's no point where they change from a dream world to a real world or the other way around. So it's a continuous circle of dreaming, imagining, hallucinating, raving, and living the reality. In my mind, there's no real distinction. All the writers are realist writers.
Yeah. This is going to be the last question, but I'd like to comment. I think that you connect very strongly with the Spanish soul. We are realists, vital, passionate, but we also have the other side, the night of the soul. It's what when St. John of the Cross says, all knowledge transcending. Yeah? I think I connected you with Cioran, for example. He loved Spanish mysticism, for example. Although you and Cioran are quite different writers. One last question. You explore the conscience of mankind. Men are like a tree, or writers are like trees. They try to emerge up into the sky to find the light, but at the same time, they go deep into the ground
with their
roots into a very dark place. What have you seen in the dark place?
I've seen myself all the time. It's like in the fairy tales. You remember that in the fairy tales, the main character is invited in a big castle with hundreds of rooms, hundreds of doors. And somebody says, you can explore all the castle. All the castle, you can open all the doors except one. It's the hidden door. The room which is forbidden. And of course, he goes directly to that door.
That reminds me of the story of Kafka, of the man waiting at the door with the guard.
Yes.
And he dies waiting, no?
Yes. And writing your work as a writer or as someone who writes is opening each and every door in your inner castle. But there comes the time when you are forced to open the hidden door and confront the monster who is there. And each and every writer who got there up to the end described this monster in the same way. It was me. it was me. It's the deepest experience that we can have. Our inner monster is always ourselves. The Minotaur, I don't know, and Theseus are actually the same person. So the last story is like a mirror. You see yourself in it. You see yourself like in, I don't know, in the portrait of Dorian Gray. You see yourself like a devil if you are a saint, or like a saint if you are a devil. And this is a terrible experience. It changes you forever.
Well, sadly, we have to come to an end. Ahora voy a hablar en español. Creo que Mircea se merece un fuerte aplauso y un agradecimiento.
Thank you.
You're fantastic. I mean,